had just started the stream. I was gonna start playing some music, and then Omar jumped on. So I will. I will go. In fact, I hadn't even had the chance to say, "Hey, I'm gonna play some music" yet. So that was maybe perfect timing. How's it going?
You know.
Well, that works as far as a sound check is nothing else. So
Yeah, I've survived a couple months. You know.
yeah. That's why. Well, I kind of not wanted to ask you really about that directly, but I know in after Netlabel Day, this past year, I know you had said that you were thinking about how do you make Netlabel Day part of part of a year-round experience, and so I was curious if you had gotten anywhere with that, or if life stuff had sort of derailed all of that.
Well, it's a tough question. Partly because it's in the name, you know.
You're right. Yeah.
And so I'm struggling against that, number one.
Yes.
But also because the event itself is such an incredible mess right now. And that's not Manuel's fault or even mine, I think, although I probably have made it worse in many ways. It's difficult to justify Netlabel Day to a brand new musician who's never heard of it or something. And every time the subject matter comes up, I feel like I'm talking to people who are always in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and they're almost all tech bros or, techno libertarians of some sort, right?
Yeah.
And I think the way that you extend Netlabel Day into a year-round thing is to get away from that crowd, in a sense, because I don't think that's where the continuity is. I think the continuity is in using the event to kind of proselytize, if you will, and evangelize for something a little better than Spotify, something a little better than the sort of garbage commercial arrangements that we have. But it's difficult to stretch that out for a lot of reasons, I have been thinking, well, I started a radio station this time, so that's a start, and at least I can feature all of the stuff from all past editions of Netlabel Day, and that can be in continuous mode. So that exists now. I have to replace my crummy Mac Mini, which was kind of my headless server for it right now. But as soon as I get that taken care of, I'll get back to having that all accessible in as high quality a file as I can for a stream,
Yeah.
So there is something.
Is there a so you mentioned some equipment?
Yeah.
So is there a way for people to like donate and stuff? Like I know that some people they're like, it's not, like they feel like the money is dirty and they don't want to talk about it. But like things don't exist without money. I mean, like you have to pay hosting bills, I mean, it doesn't necessarily take a lot.
Right.
But things do cost money. So and that's been kind of a little bit of a theme in a lot of these interviews. I've forced people to say, like, did you pay the person for this? Oh, yes, you did. Okay, because like people don't know that, so I don't know if you saw Donnie stopped by last week and wasn't really an interview, but we talked a lot. And it's just like, oh yeah, this guy did my video, and that's what people say. But what really happened is Donnie hired a guy to do the video for him. Like it's like this thing people don't talk about, and like people don't, it's like shit's not free.
No.
Like so anyway, back to my question. Do you have a Patreon? Do you have like PayPal? I mean,
I do. but it's on the down low while I
Yeah.
actually figure out where the tiles are now, right? I mean, or the tiers rather.
Yeah.
Um,
Fair
I have to
enough.
figure out a bunch of things. I mean, I inherited Netlabel Day mostly because I didn't want to see it go away, and
Yeah.
nobody else
Okay.
was stupid enough to take it, right? So there's that. I was stupid enough to take it, but in my stupidity, there was a bit of wisdom, which is okay. We need to get back to real simple things, and we had gotten away from that. A couple of years of quarantine didn't make it pleasant, at that point. And that I think that had made it extremely hard on Manuel to keep on running Mist, which eventually, of course, he closed, and to do Netlabel Day at the same time, and to try to get people to adhere to schedules, and to try to get any feedback whatsoever from the alleged Creative Commons alleged community, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I could see problems even then when I inherited it. And I thought, okay, what do we need to do? And there's a couple really basic things. One, we got to redefine net label, because I think that's been a problem. I've had enough submissions / inquiries from individual artists who go,
Yeah.
can I participate even though I'm not a label? And my answer is, well, if you can make music, you're a label these days, right? And I don't want to make the labels sound like they're doing a completely inept or unmeaningful job, because they're not. But again, the phrase net label, indeed the whole idea of a record label, to me is something completely different from what it is to my friends in their teens and 20s, right? I mean, if you had given me a record that was on, and you said it was on Sire, for instance, I would have known exactly what it sounded like, right? If you would have given me a record on 4AD, I would have known exactly what it sounded like before I even put it on. And labels were responsible for an incredibly strong sense of identity and continuity. And that doesn't exist quite that way anymore for lots of reasons. Um, I would say the gates are a little more wide open in that sense, but also the problem with wide open gates is you still need traffic cops to direct people, right? Otherwise, it just turns into a mess.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is kind of what, Stoffel and I,
Hmm.
mostly Stoffel and I. Do you know Stoffel?
Yeah.
Okay. We've been talking, and actually, I shouldn't say mostly me and him. William Magos has been involved in this conversation a lot, but I think
Mhm.
he's kind of coming at it from the fan perspective a little.
Sure.
Well, no, that's not true. He's a podcaster, and so he's coming at it from the, hey, I use Creative Commons music sort of thing. But I don't think he's not embedded in the scene quite as much as, I mean, Stoffel used to run, Clone Commons, and
Right.
he's been around the block. Um, and I think William, he really wants to help, but I think is maybe just kind of too new to the scene to
Mm.
really even know where he can contribute. But Stoffel and I have been talking, and well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
I know that I've told you via email that next week we're doing a global summit. I don't know if that was really on your radar, or are you planning on coming to that? I know I
Yeah.
kind of
It's
just
on my
like,
calendar.
sweet, yeah, because um, you know I kind of just said, hey, this is a thing we're doing. Like, didn't ask anybody for their time. I'm like, well, I'm free. So this is
Hmm.
when it's happening. So I think next week, that's probably the first thing we got to figure out is, how often do we want to have these calls? Because we're not going to solve, we're not going to end world hunger next week. So,
Oh no.
like,
Take at
so
least 3 weeks.
you're right. Exactly. So, but anyway, so we've been talking about where we want to head with things, and the curation piece.
Yeah.
And I suggested, a lot of people, I suggested the name for this new organization be the actually what I'm using for the YouTube channel now, and for the PeerTube channel both. Creative Commons music. Actually, I started off with slightly different, but basically it was Creative Commons music community consortium, which
Right.
is a kind of a bland name, but it tells you what we do. And people were saying, we need something more aggressive, and it's kind of like, you know, the problem with like the aggressive things is like which side of the aggression are you on? So I was kind of
Right.
like, I was playing with this like curator thing, this theme, and I was like, well, like we could really lean into that, and we could call ourselves, like we could reclaim like gatekeeper or something like
Hmm.
that, which is kind of has a negative connotation, but like we could there's a whole like long list of, I don't want, I don't really want to draw too much comparison to like the Creative Commons community being like a marginalized scene. We're more obscure than we are marginalized, I
Yeah.
would say.
Agreed.
But there is a long history of marginalized group reclaiming, things that, were used against them. And so I was like, well, maybe we could do that. Like people want this aggressive tone with gatekeepers, and like, gatekeepers, those are the enemies. And I'm like, well, yeah, but gatekeepers serve like this dual role. And then
Right.
when you said the traffic cop, that's what made me think of this. It's like this is the thing that and like all these metaphors are so mixed, because then you say, oh, get traffic cops, and then people are like, fuck the police. It's like, well, okay, but like we have to like we have to use words. like
Yeah.
like
Exactly.
like what word is clean, like you're either going to get something bland or you're going to get something that's going to piss people off. Like there's really like and I mean, just to his credit, Stovall was like, "Oh, okay, I didn't like." He understood where I was going from, but I do think this, I mean, people use the word curation. I think that
Ugh.
there's not a whole lot that's bad with that. But when I hear that word, I often I get this picture of like uppity museums. Like that's like it's like that's so like that's a word that like all these words have baggage. Like that's not the only place that word can go. But like
Well,
that's kind of the, you know
you got to unpack. You got to unpack the baggage at some point.
right, exactly.
I
So
mean, the reality of language is that it's complex and
yeah,
contexts are constantly shifting, and
yeah.
that's the deal. And I'm okay with that. Um, see, when you say curator, to me, I wish I had that image in my head of uppity museum people, because what I have these days is some lazy asshole just putting a bunch of crap on a blog and calling himself a curator. So, it depends on what side of that
yeah,
fence you come from,
right.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
And again,
that's
yeah,
true.
metaphors are difficult, but at the same time, I don't think we I don't think we have to apologize for language. Obviously, we're using it to communicate right now, so it's
Right,
doing just fine. I think what we have to do is be really clear when somebody has an objection, that their objection is noted
right. That's
and that
fair.
that wasn't the intention at all.
Yeah,
And I think a certain amount of the problem that we have linguistically these days is that so much of contextualization, if you want to be fancy about it, but really so much of the meaning of sentences now has been completely shuffled off onto the listener rather than to the speaker.
yeah.
And that's tedious and exhausting for an awful lot of reasons. But on top of that, being tedious and exhausting, it's downright annoying because they
Yeah,
don't bother to check with the speaker what the speaker actually
yeah.
meant half the time. They
Right.
just run off.
Yeah.
And we can't be doing that kind of garbage if we're going to have anything that we claim to be a community. Community means, community interpretations. It
Yeah.
means we sit down and we commune and get together and say, okay, this is what this means for us. This is what we're going to do. These are the things. Anybody can put together a crummy ass user group online from a forum, right? And unfortunately, if we're going to be if we're going to be brassy about it, I think what we've been stuck with in the Creative Commons for the better part of 15 years certainly has been a user group, and there's nothing like a community in it. So we need to start getting back to the community aspect of it.
Yeah. So I don't think, I kind of feel like there was some community, not going back that far. I mean, like, with Free Music Archive
Mm, indeed.
was like had their podcast, and they were actually like promoting like real curators on their homepage and stuff like that. I think there was, you know before Jamindo did all the different things that they've done that have pissed things off. I mean, there was a
Right.
time that and I think that they still have some of that over at
Oh,
CC Mixter. And I wish, like, they're doing their day-to-day thing to just like keep the site running, and I get that, but I wish we
sure.
could like get them more involved in things. And I think that's got to be one of our big goals, because like um they're really like walking the walk over there. And but I and I don't know, I mean, like, when we back when Tom and I were doing Music Management, like we would have on Emily. I mean, like, we interacted with CC Mixer. I know Mike
Hmm.
has spent some time with them. And then just I think that the whole, like, and I don't know the ins and outs of it, so I shouldn't say too much, but it seems to me that um the relationship with Creative Commons, with HQ, um was just really draining
Yeah.
on the folks over at CC Mixter. And I know that people, you know um well, I mean, for obvious reasons, are not super happy with Creative Commons HQ, but I do think,
Well, I got a list. Trust me.
yeah, yeah, so do I. I mean, I've received a cease and desist front letter from them, so that's
Hmm.
that's right at the top of the list. But
Yep.
I do think too that, like, you know people don't necessarily need to treat their own, like, national entities like CCHQ. Like, CCHQ has a very specific, like, mandate and legal structure because
Sure.
of 501c3 status. Now,
Yep.
it's absolutely beyond me how they think that music, the arts, is not something they can do as part of I don't understand that. Like, that's just strategic, I feel like, because, like, the arts are very much part of 501c3s, but whatever. um
Well, the art's
like,
the basis for the entire organization in the first
yeah,
place. The
it's
whole
like,
point of Ashcroft,
yeah,
as a
yeah,
court case, was that it was an artistic
right.
case.
But, like CC Japan, CC Canada, CC Germany, CC Australia, all of these organizations are a little freer
Yeah.
to do what they want. So I don't think people should necessarily. I mean, and I'm sure some of these organizations have their own issues.
Oh yeah.
But I don't think people should be necessarily afraid of reaching out to their local organizations. I mean, the worst that can happen is they tell you no. I mean, and you're no worse off than you were before you asked them at that point. So
Right.
I think there is, you know they could potentially be very strong allies, I guess, is what I'm saying. And
Sure. And they
if we
should
just
be.
if we just they should be. That's correct. And
Yeah.
if we just ignore that they exist because some guys in San Francisco pissed us off, then I feel like that doesn't. Well, I mean, that's where CCHQ is. Okay, it's not like a tech bro. I mean, maybe it is ultimately a tech bro joke,
It is ultimately a tech bro
but
thing, totally.
but I mean, uh,
But the
yeah,
Internet Archive is there too. I mean, the problem is you're inheriting a bunch of stuff, right?
yeah,
You're inheriting a bunch of stuff with technology. That's what we're stuck with.
yeah,
And I've been to enough CC summits and met with a bunch of people in CC privately and even at little tiny mixers in art bars on Capitol Hill here in Seattle to know who they are, and I can sit back with a couple of them and I can talk with Kat about playing the bassoon because she's a bassoonist. Like, that's curious. Funny that you didn't mention that at any point to anybody. You know, isn't it curious that you grew up and are a trained musician and yet I don't have a musical ombudsman at your organization? Seems
yeah,
like you would be the obvious choice for something like that. So there are all those things that are built into the CCHQ structure that I understand need to be, let's just politely say, refined. Right? So I'm going to leave it at that. But I think the other national groups, and God bless them outside of the United States, anybody not in the United States has an awful lot more play with their national group than we do, because we have to deal with CCHQ as though
Well,
it were our national group, even though it's
so
not. Right.
well, there is a CCUSA
Exactly.
now.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know what they do, but
Right.
but they do exist.
Yep.
So
They do exist. I've
um,
talked to them.
yeah. So they didn't exist for a while. So and
Yeah.
then at some point they decided that would be a good idea, which yeah, it does seem like a good idea.
Yeah.
But
And I think
they
that's
should do something.
yeah, I think doing things is good, and I think that CCUS's function is the same as CC Portugal or CC New Zealand or something, right? It's not just to be a bad version of CCHQ. We already know what they do for
Yeah,
us, which is to say they do nothing.
right.
So let's not do that with our local organizations. Let's try to do something with our local organizations. Everybody's got a laundry list of things that they would love their local CC folks to do.
Yeah,
You know, if if there's anything aggravating about it, it's that CCHQ used to produce an awful lot of video and an awful lot of things about how artists could use
yeah,
Creative Commons. And they were incredibly beautiful things. And they were also really good at listening to their member chapters,
yeah,
who were also producing really fantastic things, like Aotearoa in New Zealand doing just fantastic work with things like that, and CC Australia, and of course CC Portugal with all the lovely, wonderful, crazy people there doing copy wrong performances online and so on. I love that stuff. And they were way more receptive to that pre 2015. I don't know what happened, but I have actually run the numbers on this because Larry and I had a moment where I just had a hypothesis, like what happened in 2012, 2013, because the number of mentions of CC plummets, even though the web, of course, grows massively.
yeah, yeah,
And it's like, well, it's no longer attached to people's individual personalities. There's that, of course, all of the big fancy guys who were doing other things. Um, they're no longer active members of that. Larry's gone, Joji's gone for a lot of reasons, and so on and so on and so on. But we can't just tie a membership group like that to one or two personalities anyway. So it should continue to stay pretty high. And we had, Jenny Rose Halpern was writing just wonderful music things for the CC blog. Every single week there was something fascinating from her, talking about talking with CC artists around the world, whether it was Bottle Smoker or whoever else, from Indonesia, Lebanon, the United States, China, and she got around a lot. And then when Jenny left, nobody took up that role. And I think that's been a huge gap for them. And if the membership chapters could do anything for us, they could start there. They could start talking to people who actually use CC currently and show that we're not a bunch of crazies or lunatics or reactionary conservatives with graying hair, right? But that we're actually really serious individuals who make an awful lot of art. And just knowing that the art is out there is an argument for the Creative Commons and for Creative Commons art. But if we don't put a light on it and we leave it in shadow the entire time, then everybody else who has a question about something tangentially related to copyright, like, oh, well, what do I do with my new album? Oh, well, I'll just throw it up there under the standard Bandcamp license. Like, oh, please don't, right? There's so many other options. There's so many ways around that, but Bandcamp isn't going to tell you that. Jamendo will, if you can read through their 18 pages of doggerel online and so on, but we need to be an awful lot better with that. I think also we're stuck in the age of platforms.
yeah.
Right? And platforms have, curiously, kind of the job that labels used to have for record industry, and the cinema industry way back, which is, I mean, if there are gatekeepers, those are the biggest gatekeepers ever, right?
Oh
Or
yeah.
the people who own the platforms. There's no question that that's the case. But you don't have to be a jerk off just because you have keys to a gate. You can
Yeah.
let people through. You can
Well,
say, hey, your job is to go through, and the only function that I have is to make sure that something that is absolutely categorically morally detestable does not go past me.
yeah, this is actually exactly where the idea came from me, because I remember who it was, but I was watching a video, some YouTuber who does music stuff, and he was talking about how, it used to be that, like, you had your record exec guy at the label, and he was the gatekeeper.
Yeah.
But now it's the algorithm that's the
Yep.
gatekeeper.
Exactly.
So my thought was kind of like making the humans the gatekeepers again. That was kind of my where I was going, which I don't think that I really I didn't present that super well when I mean, and like I said, I wasn't even sure I really liked the name to start with. It was just, no, this is a thing that I'm I'm thinking about. But that the algorithm being, and the thing is, I don't know, like, I don't know that the algorithms in and of themselves are bad. Like, I remember, like, way back when, there was, like 20 years ago, you had like Yahoo Music, you
Hmm.
know, and like it would suggest things that you liked based on your, like, listening. I mean, like, it's not new. I mean, it was pretty new
Right.
then, but um and it seemed pretty cool. But then somehow, and I remember this kind of happening with Pandora, like, it just all started to, like everything, like, regress towards the mean at some
Oh,
point. And I
absolutely.
don't know if that was like intentional, like, like, oh, this is what makes most people happy, or like, I I don't, or like, maybe, like, I mean, at some level. So I don't know how much you know about machine learning, but there's a thing
Quite
in
a bit.
machine learn. This I do. It's not exactly right to say that I do machine learning in my day job, but it's not exactly
Mhm.
wrong to say that either. But in any case, for anybody who's not familiar, there's a thing called overtraining
Yep.
in machine learning.
Yep.
And basically, if you just give, an algorithm a picture of a Dalmatian every single time, it's always Dalmatians. The algorithm is not gonna figure out that a husky is always a dog.
Right.
It thinks Dalmatians are dogs, and it
Mhm.
has no idea out of that. And I kind of wonder if that's what has happened in music, but I don't, at the same time that, like what I used to do is I would listen to Pandora, and I would, like, only listen um to bands that, like, had uh Creative Commons stuff. So, like,
Yeah.
like, I mean, I would that would be as wide as it could be. Like Nine Inch Nails. Okay, like, they're not a starving artist, but whatever. They do have, like, depending on how you count, they have 5 albums worth of of CC material.
Yeah.
So, but so I would do that, but then it was just like I just couldn't. I mean, maybe part of the reason I stopped doing it is because I realized that there was so much on Bandcamp, and, like, most of that stuff is just not. It's just not in Pandora. So, like,
Mhm.
I think that I kind of got frustrated with the lack of bands being there and just gave up. But I don't know. It's
It's a very serious issue, and I kind of I'm in a weird position of not running a net label and not being a practicing musician and yet still in charge of freaking net label day.
so okay. Um, so, but you do poetry,
I
right? You do
do.
spoken word. So,
I do.
I mean, so this is
I
one of the
actually am a
things.
musician. I just haven't played in a while because I
Yeah.
got so tired of dealing with
Well,
that nonsense.
this is one of the things that I've never really known. where, you know, sometimes people do spoken word and it's like over bedded music. It's like,
Hmm.
and it's like rhythmic and like my definition was sort of was like organized sound when I was like, let's have a definition for what we promote. I don't want to have any arguments about whether noise is music. I mean, people are
Oh
calling it
God.
noise for a reason. So
Right.
let's just let them have that. And but the spoken word thing is I mean, it sounds like you're kind of saying it's not music. That, I mean, you're saying you're not a musician, but you do spoken word. So
Well, I'm not a practicing musician. I think it was more accurate.
well,
It
okay, but
doesn't
you
mean
do
it
spoken
doesn't
word
mean I'm not a
in
musician.
like in November, right? So I mean, that's fairly recent. Like,
Yeah, I've done an awful lot of stuff in the last year. This year I've been on stage more times than in the last 10 years combined, which is surreal. And and I kind of remember why I didn't want to be on stage every time I'm on stage with a bunch of really beautiful people and looking out at sort of the blank audience. And it's like, oh yeah, this is why Charlie Parker spent his back to the audience for the last year and a half of his life, right? This is why Robert Fripp stands behind a couple of amplifiers on his tour with Peter Gabriel and so on. And it's not that I don't have the ability to connect with the audience, etc. It's that I've found that music, particularly the kind of music I'm interested in and the kind of music that I played, could never quite find the right playing context. And it was partly because I grew up in the grunge years and every damn venue around here was freaking wall to wall garage rock. And I can take that for about 15 minutes and then I'm done, but everybody not only assumes that is what everybody wants to hear, they assume that's what you inherently play. And so negotiating things with clubs at that time was like, well, no, actually, yeah, we've played in rock bands, but we're going to play this piece with me on the oboe hooked up to a MIDI synth, and Tim's going to be behind me performing bass synthesizer loops with an actual reel to reel machine. It's probably not the kind of thing you want right before Bathtub Gin, or Matt Cameron's group or something like that, right? And it was neither here nor there for a lot of them. It wasn't experimental classical music, so you didn't get into that ghetto.
yeah,
It was way too far out for the jazz people at the time because jazz was entering a period of ridiculous conservatism at that moment. And it sure as hell wasn't going to be anything that we would call quote unquote grunge Seattle
yeah,
style.
right.
Although I did open up for the Casper Brotsman massacre one time, which strangely worked because Casper has the same approach to sound that we did in a lot of ways because he's really goddamn noisy and it's really freaking loud and it's really abstract. And that worked, but most of our stuff, nah, we were just in really terrible situations. And I understand that there's kind of a label like equivalent for that, right? It's like every so often you'd see a band, you go, why are they with A&M Records? Right? What the hell are they doing on A&M?
Yeah, yeah,
And yeah, and it's the same, I think, now these days with CC, but even worse because our labels have meant so little in a sense. And the problem is, I don't think people understand the power that labels actually can wield for great justice if we're going to use the trope, right?
yeah,
But one of them, I think to you and me, it's so obvious we rarely think about it, is just labels will put musicians' music out that they like. And that sounds really strange until you realize that when you go through the roster of Sony, or Bertelsmann or something like that, and you go, God, is there any executive who actually listens to all this crap that they put out? And the answer, of course, is no, they don't. Whereas on Nesui Ertegun's Atlantic Records, like, oh yeah, I'll bet he listens to all this. Undoubtedly he did, and you'd feel the same way about, Francis Wolff at Blue Note. Yeah, of course he listened to all of that. Of course he listened to everything on his label. And that kind of identity that labels had is extremely strong. And I think the other piece of it that we have in the CC field is kind of the thing that I have encountered often with the Seattle Star, which is when I explain to people that we publish under Creative Commons license, the first thing they say is, "What's that?"
Yeah.
Right. So I wised up about 6 years. It took me that long. After about 6 years, I stopped saying we used a Creative Commons license, and I said, "Hey, we use a sharing license that allows other people to copy your work and distribute it online as long as they keep your name on it. Is that okay with you?" And they go, "Yeah." Bing! Ah, look, I turned you into a CC user without even having to do a thing.
Yeah.
And as a magazine, I have published an awful lot of poets who would never, ever have put a Creative Commons license on their own work because reasons, right? They
Yeah.
would have had to
So
read through all that stuff first. And labels have the same ability to do that with the musical artists that come through.
yes. One thing about that, I think sometimes people get frustrated with musicians that, I mean, it frustrates me a little bit, but I understand it. They get on a net label
Mhm.
and the net label uses CC, but then they don't put the CC license on their own Bandcamp page or on their
Oh,
own
yeah.
website. It's
Yeah.
like this, what you're talking about is exactly what has happened. Is the
Yep.
label has said, "Hey, we do this thing where people can share it, but they can't use it for commercial licenses. Is that cool?" And they say yes, and then it's part of Creative Commons. So like, it's not like the band is trying to dupe you.
No.
Like they don't even know.
Right.
like,
Exactly. Exactly.
um, so like, like the thing is, unless the label that you're going to is one of the guys you mentioned at the top, that's just like some guy who's putting stuff on it, it's basically stolen works, like, unless that's what's happening with your label, then it's cool. Like,
Yeah.
don't be mad at the musician, just be happy they said yes when the net label guy said, "Hey, can we do this?"
Yeah, exactly.
And you know it is confusing,
Mm.
but especially if you forget where you found it initially, and then you're like, I know this is Creative Commons because i wouldn't have i wouldn't have I wouldn't have like saved it if
Yeah,
it wasn't
exactly.
Creative Commons. So like, but where did I find this? So like, this happened, I don't know, maybe a month ago, where I played a track, and then I went to the band's Bandcamp, and I couldn't find anything that listed as CC. I'm like, well, I know for a fact this has got to be Creative. I didn't just pull this out. But Jamendo, I don't know what they've done to make
Oh,
their site so like
oh,
searchable, but
yep.
uh I mean, did you think it was a good idea to not let search engines index your site? Because
Well,
frankly, I don't think that's a good idea.
it's a very bad idea.
but but I somehow they've managed to where like stuff is very unfindable.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was a band on Jamendo. And God bless Rhino, because I always find Jamendo to be a frustrating experience, but
Mhm.
Rhino does he finds some good shit over at Jamendo, and
Oh,
so
yeah, totally.
I don't know if he's got an app or how he finds that stuff, but yeah, Jamendo. I mean, God bless him, but
Well,
it's
we have
frustrating
to get them
experience
on
over
our
there.
side, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing I said to Nate Angel when he took over at Creative Commons. I said, if you can convince the guys at Bandcamp to do one thing for us, it would have an incredible effect on thousands and thousands of artists that would make all of this much easier. And it doesn't have to be difficult, you know. And by analogy, if this is what CC can do, in my opinion, if Cable or Cat or somebody from CCHQ calls up Bandcamp and says, "Hey, why did you take away the ability to search for the phrase 'some rights reserved' on your site?" right? Oh, was that a Google thing? Could you put that back in? You know, could you come up with your own index? You obviously have a list of the license because I've
Yeah.
asked you. If they say that to somebody at Bandcamp, it's going to be this. It's going to be as if 300 of us peons, right,
Yeah. Yeah.
who are simply artists existing to be exploited, said it, right? And so that's where I think their métier is, right? They need to be the ones in negotiation with Flickr and Gemendo and Open Verse with Matt's group and all the rest of the things. That's their bailiwick. The rest of us, we're too tired and too busy to run that game all the time.
Yeah.
And between, I think, CCHQ and us practicing artists, if you will, that's, I think, the function of the labels and the function of the groups. Because there has to be that sort of middle ground, right? Where there's a bunch of people who do know what's going on, and we get together in a community and we find a bunch of people who are like-minded, and we go, well, I think we can convert a couple of people, right? Or I think we can convert a similarly minded group. One of the things that's on my mind is Hasbro screwing up the OGL, right? Last year when they decided to try to completely pull the open gaming license away from all of the Wizards of the Coast products, which met with an absolute hellstorm, as you would expect, until finally people realized that the OGL actually did nothing for them anyway. And then what happened was as it turns out, it's a group of lawyers here in Seattle who happen to be gamers that I've known for a while. They said, well, why don't we come up with a better license than that? And so they came up with the ORC license, which of course makes sense for the kind of thing that they want to use it for. Now, of course, then you have the question of trying to convert the person on Drive-Through RPG, right, or one of the gaming sites or itch to use the new license. That's always a challenge. And they're facing the exact same problem that we are with our love of Creative Commons. It's like, well, yeah, this is the obvious choice for you, but I can't make it any more obvious in a sense than it is. I can't do any more persuasion than I have. Somebody else needs to help out. Somebody else needs to make that pitch also, because people are tired of hearing me talk about Creative Commons, quite honestly. so I'm not the one to talk to. Maybe I'm too cranky, or I'm not cranky enough, or I'm not one of the insiders. And that's kind of the weird thing about being sort of the spoken poet with a bunch of freaking fantastic musicians, like Laurie Goldston and Robin Holcomb and all these people around me, is that I feel like I'm a hunchback in a dinner jacket at most of those things. And I kind of feel that way running Netlabel Day, as it turns out too. But one of the advantages of being the hunchback in the dinner jacket is nobody expects me to be pretty. There's that.
You could also just lean into that and literally just go up on stage with a humpback and just be Igor. Just
I have thought it multiple times.
Yeah, I mean,
I wear Grinch my Grinch slippers onto the stage every place I perform. That's my one ritual that I have kept up for the better part of 10 years. It's like my rotating Grinch socks, because barefoot is a little bit too I don't know, Cesario Vora or something like that. I don't feel like I have that kind of cred. But there's a respect that I have for the stage when I walk onto it that I don't want to leave a mark, and my shoes always leave marks. So I go up in my socks and my slipper that have no that have no soles in them. So it's all very fuzzy and quaint, and leave only memories, take only pictures, or whatever the hell that phrase is.
Yeah. I am thinking people may want to view, if you have any spoken word things. Can such things be found on YouTube?
Oh, gads. Probably. I would just have to figure out where they are. tend not to look at myself very
Fair
often.
enough.
You know how that works. I know that they have been recorded because people send me the videos of the things that they
Yeah,
have done, but then I have no idea where they actually have them hosted. And again, we're back to the
right.
platform problem, right?
Exactly.
So there's that. Um, I did a curators concert. I think it's still on YouTube. Let me check.
Okay.
Even though it wasn't recorded for them originally, I have all, of course, I have all those videos myself on my fantastic computer, but that does y'all no good. And I'm keeping them to myself because I'm a gatekeeper and a traffic cop, right?
At least in theory, I think you can. Well, you could share screen. We've experimented with the various things, but there's the option to share audio.
Oh yeah.
But I feel like, well, the last time we tried it, it like didn't record or something. There was something like, I think we could hear it, like all the guests, of the Jitsi, but it didn't get recorded for anybody else, which is awkward at best. I mean,
Yes.
like, let
Yeah.
me just fast forward through this weird silence. But
Yeah.
if you wanted to play some audio and give it a shot, and then people can, it can either be awkward or not. I mean,
Oh, good grief. Let me check and see if I've got anything that I'm not entirely embarrassed by that's accessible at the same time, right?
well,
Uh,
the other thing that we could do is, if you wanted to take the opportunity to upload one of those to YouTube, I could also upload it to PureTube. So people that don't want to go to YouTube, they can, and then I can just point people to that.
that
That's
I'm amenable to that, I
okay.
think. Let me see what I've
So
got.
I'll put, whatever you find and whatever you do, at some point I will go back and put it in the show notes and say this is where you can go and at least listen to Omar do his thing. I don't, a worst case scenario, if you've got some audio, then we can
Oh
point
yeah.
people there. So um
Well, with any luck, they will ignore me the same way they are ignoring me now. So that's my plan.
yeah. So changing the subject just a bit.
Yeah.
I don't know if I told you this because this may have been something that I was going to talk to you about, and also it's something that I kind of decided I was going to stop thinking about until after next week. But July 13th, U.S. time,
Okay.
I am hosting a CC Midwest Summit, which I think I said last week to Donnie. I'm calling it Midwest just so like people don't think we're like, we have like 1,000-person conference center or something. It's like 50 people max. But like, if you want to fly from Shanghai or Kabul or wherever and come to my 50-person max thing, then fine. You're welcome. I speak English, so if you're flying from Shanghai or Kabul, then if you want to be able to interact, you better be able to speak English. But and there's not going to be a lot of people in town that speak anything else either, so that's just the way it is, unfortunately.
Indeed.
But I am trying to work on that. I am slowly learning some Spanish, but it's not good enough to say yes, you can come if you speak Spanish and I can talk to you. Like, I can read at like a 4-year-old level or something. I can read poorly.
Hey, nothing wrong with being poor.
Yeah. But anyway, July 13th. So my idea was that we would try to do something with CC Japan at the very least. But I know last year you kicked it off, the stream with like, there are some islands where it becomes the new day, the first. I don't remember what those islands are. Perhaps you do. But out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. They're on the international date line. But I think Japan is the first place with like, or maybe New Zealand is.
New Zealand is first.
Yeah,
for us.
yeah.
At least.
So, I don't know. Well, part of the reason for Japan is that it lined up. Oh, that's right. I looked at it. Maybe it was New Zealand, maybe it was the islands, but it was going to be like 5 o'clock in the morning for us. And I was like, yeah, no,
Yep.
I'm not doing that. But so Japan ends up being either 8 or 9 or 10. They don't change time, and we do. So at the time that I looked, it was 9, but I think that's going to have to be shifted an hour because we're going to change time again here in like a month or something. But in any case, it should be doable to do something with CC Japan. But I've never, maybe I've just missed it. I've never heard of folks doing like local stuff for Netlabel Day. Do you know, do people do get together, watch parties, listening parties, things of that nature?
We used to, and that's been broken for a while too. And that's another thing that I've actually been working on this year to try to get back.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
So useful. It's so useful to do that.
Yeah.
When Manuel did it back in 2015, 2016, he actually had sponsored concerts also that were part of Netlabel Day, which was kind of cool. And I'd like that also, particularly if they're live streamed.
Were those local to him?
They were all over. There were some in Australia, there were some in Chile, there were some in France, there were some in Italy, and so they were very scattered, which was nice.
Yeah. When you say sponsored, what do you mean?
Well, I think that's a very good question. I think, and I'm not sure that he knew.
Okay, well, I mean,
I think that's the difficulty.
Well, sure, but that's kind of the nature of the DIY.
Yeah,
people doing their thing.
They're listed on the Netlabel Day page. They were given a Netlabel Day banner, so there's that.
Sweet.
Now I just have to recover that. Actually, I'm going to make one from scratch. That's been my
plan. I was going to say, again, we're back to you need a Patreon or a tip jar or something.
Yeah, I probably do. That I should actually advertise a little more.
Yeah. Well, so I'll tell this story. I've told it before, but for people that, because you're probably thinking, oh, I can afford to do this and whatever. So this is related actually to the show. So back when we started doing PeerTube, we were very confused why some of our shows were syncing and some weren't. Mostly, well, entirely, it was just ignorance. But I finally figured out that what was happening was that the shows were too long, and we had a daily limit. And I don't know how it'd work if I like tried to sync it at like 11:30. Could I split like one show across 2 days? I don't know if that would have worked. But essentially, they were never going to sync because they were too long. And it turned out that like the better the video quality somebody had, the shorter the show had to be for it to be able to sync, because it wasn't a time thing. It was you couldn't be, I think it was 500 megs.
Yep. Thing. It's a data thing.
Yeah. So Dave, the guy over at Dalek.zone, where our PeerTube instance, said, hey, I can bump up your data, not a problem. I'm like, well, I mean, I appreciate that, I really do, but like, it's not free, and if that's the data cap that you need, then like, we'll just make it work. Like, I did a lot of research on the sites that gave us what we needed as far as the sync and everything, and this site is good for us. And I don't want to put you in a bind. And he was like, no problem, whatever. Well, fast forward a month and a half or 2 months or something. I don't know what happened. He wasn't public about what happened. I didn't ask him. Some financial difficulty. So, he was asking people, hey, he announced the site is going away. Now, as it turns out, somebody came and rescued the site, which is great. But the
Yeah.
point being, and this is why, and this is very fresh to me, is like these things cost money. So,
Mhm.
if people want these things to be sustained, then they've gotta support them. So,
Oh yeah.
um,
Yeah. You sound
so
like Rhino.
and at some point, like, it's like, yeah, you might be able to afford, and international shipping is not cheap, but let's just say you can afford to send it to even like 10 places. Well, if Netlabel day grows and all of a sudden 100 places want to have shows,
Mhm.
I mean, like, that starts to look pretty expensive at that point. So like scaling cost, like there's like no way around that. Like, if we want to have like a real, like a vibrant community that people recognize from the outside, we're gonna
Mhm.
have to put time and money and energy into it. Like all of us, like not just me and you, like everybody listening to this, like we're all gonna have to do that. And um it's gonna take work.
Yeah,
Like,
of
it's
course.
not it's not all fun and games. Well, I think, you know about a decade ago, I saw the writing on the wall. I didn't see the exact, like, I didn't see WFMU getting rid of the FMA. I didn't see the exact, but I saw, hey, like, we got to sustain this. Right now it's just a bunch of like podcasters and some sites and whatever. It's the wild wild west. And
Mhm.
like, eventually the wild wild west gets conquered. Like that's not how, like, things exist. And I was like, we're going to get trampled on if we don't come together as a unit. And I mean, I don't know if it was because people didn't see the vision, like, which is partially my fault if I didn't present the vision. But like, for whatever reason, we seem to, and like, I'm older, hopefully wiser, now. But like, and I think part of the problem then is that maybe I came at it looking at it as like a, from the, as a podcaster. And so that was the view that I saw everything through. And now, being involved with Black Sonic, like, I see things very differently. And obviously time has helped with some of that too. But I feel like there's more community engagement this time too. And I don't know what that's all about, but I do think that the FMA, the demise of the FMA, it's probably part of that. That people see, like the crumbling walls of the city. They didn't heed the prophet's warning of the crumbling city, but but now that the city has crumbled, then they're like, oh yeah, we should probably rebuild the city. So, better late than never. Uh, but
As
yeah,
long
I
as it
mean,
gets
I think,
done.
what was that?
As long as it gets done, right?
Yeah. So, I think we have to think about, and part of this is like, for people getting ready to talk about this next week, is like, we have to think about like, what are we willing to sacrifice as far as time and money to make this happen,
Mhm.
because um you know like, at some level, like, it's going to require that. But then the other thing is that, like, you have people that come in and they're enthusiastic and then they burn out. So like, like Williams talking about, like, basically like taking on Spotify, which, I mean, like, if that's what we want to do, like, we're talking like 10 years minimum. Like,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
that's a task. Like, and I don't think we have that kind of money. Like, like, if you really want that kind of money, then you need VC or angel, or I don't know all the terms. I've never been in the startup space, but you need somebody who can put zeros on the check. Like, you need lots of zeros, and
Well,
then
and you
a
need lots
number
of
that's not a
favorites.
zero at the beginning, and then lots of zeros. That's what you need.
Yeah.
So, I don't think we have that. I
I don't
mean,
think we have the money. I think we have the the will.
yeah, yeah.
And I think we have a certain amount of personnel. I think we could probably use some more on that front.
Yeah. I think that that's one thing we've been particularly bad at, as bringing people in. you know, like I don't remember when I said this, but it's like, where are the young people?
I keep asking that too.
I mean,
And well, part of the problem again is it's a conceptual problem with the youth, and it dawned on me how clear it was out from the outside when I was at the CC Summit a couple of years ago that was online, and they were talking about piracy in the South Asian continent. And he said, well, he was um, he was very understanding and very pro piracy in a lot of instances, and it was very clear what he meant was something different from what we would consider piracy, of course. But the thing that I took out of it most clearly was that it went back to what Larry used to say: we don't want fair uses of things, we want free uses of things. And so the legal problem, of course, was defining exactly how those things would break down. But from the point of view of the youth, free use has an awful lot of connotations that it doesn't for us who are a little more world beaten, right? And part of the other problem is that when everything is accessible, nothing is, right?
yeah,
That's an extraordinary difficulty that the youth have to tolerate. And conversely, because of that, because everything is so accessible, there's extraordinary difficulty in putting things together in a line and actually establishing causes and actually establishing effects from things, because it all seems like everything coexists on a very flat screen in non-dimensional space. And when you consider that, it must have taken, let me just guess, it must have taken at least 150 people to perform the Mahler Third Symphony, right? Because of the two choruses and the massive orchestra that it has. But I'm listening to that at the exact same time that I'm listening to somebody dicking around with his latest chuff piece on Ableton, right? And I couldn't tell you what the difference is between effort, because all I am doing is perceiving it very flat, not just from my ears point of view, but also through the historical point of view, because I'm not attached to how much work it actually used to take to put a symphony together,
yeah,
because that's not an experience that most people have anymore, if they ever did, honestly.
yeah,
And so those things get conflated. The effort in music gets conflated. There's no understanding that it's difficult to make music, because it seems like it could just be generated by an algorithm. It'll be like the All the Music project, right, where we'll just crank out all the melodies, and then we'll trademark and copyright those, and we'll be good. That'll be everything. But of course, it's a little more complex. I mean, and it seems obvious for you and me to say that, but again, we grew up with very analog things. And the one thing that analog does for you is it very clearly determines there's a limit to something. It may be a really massive limit, but there's still a limit to something. You can
yeah,
still see a horizon at some point. And in perceiving everything from a terminal, which is a sort of strange phrase, there aren't very many limits that way. You don't grasp them. They're very conceptual, and they're hard to visualize. It's difficult to tell somebody why a record, almost any given record from 1975, for instance, it's probably 38 minutes long, right? The LP is probably 38 minutes long. You and I know why that is, but somebody who's 20 years younger than me, they wouldn't have the foggiest idea. They wouldn't even have the foggiest idea what it meant to have an analog LP in the first place, and that was the only distribution mechanism for ages. And their distribution mechanism is everything is online all the time in a continuous flow. And so when there's no ability to break that flow into discrete units that are labeled and contextualized for just that purpose, it's very, very difficult to get a sense of how that would work, or even on the flip side of it, how much influence you could have over how that works. Back to what you were saying about replacing human beings with the algorithm. My thesis was in computational linguistics way back in the day, so I understand all of this stuff about language learning pretty clearly, but also from a point of view of really old technology. And one of the things that we learned by doing so much of that was it's not just about the corpus of information that the algorithm has. It's about who controls the input of the corpus of information. And that has a massive effect on the experiments depending on who actually runs it, which of course has
Yeah.
been not said, right? And it's obvious if you've done it, but you put together all the rest of the problems of overtraining and commercial influence of tipping the scales on certain things, right? And you create really bad feedback loops in the digital music world where, well, this is popular because people listen to it, and it's people listen to it because it's popular, and people are listening to popular music because it was said to be popular. And who said, right? And who said this? You know, if somebody just puts just enough money for a sponsored ad to show up in your feed, suddenly that's part of the algorithm in a much more massive way than it would have been otherwise. But you and I have, shall we say, a much smaller purse, right? To carry around the coins to feed that machine. And so it's not that the algorithm doesn't work, quote unquote. It's that honestly, we don't know what we want it to do most of the time. And two, we have, as individuals, extraordinarily little control over how the process goes. If I wanted to do one thing for the internet, in my bad days of programming, it would have been create an app online that would automatically remove all comment sections from any site you were on. Right? And there are lots of reasons for that. I mean, I'm not just being catty. I'm partly being catty, but one of the main reasons for it is that they're a massive distraction.
Well, so
right?
I've solved this for you. Let me tell you how to solve this.
Mhm.
Turn JavaScript off on your browser.
Oh, exactly. That's what I do.
Nothing else will work,
Exactly.
but the comments
Yep.
will also not work.
Yeah, I mean, if I could just block all the garbage from things that aren't just discuss, right? But people that embed comments, that would, yeah. If I could just go to any sight unseen, so to speak, that would be a great name for the actual apps.
Yeah.
Sight unseen, and it would take away everybody's textual commentary, much of which is already automated garbage that I didn't want to read in the first place. And I need to have the choice as a user of whether or not I engage somebody's nonsense. Sometimes I choose that, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I choose to go through a comment section, and I'm not saying that they should be abandoned, although I think an unmoderated comment section is a piece of Satan, definitely. But I think the same way about an unmoderated load policy on any given site, and for the same reason, because people who have more money, more know-how, more leverage, however they get it, and most of it's not going to be gotten, shall we say, fairly. It disadvantages other people to a factor of 1,000 or 10,000 for every single thing they do. And that's just not how this should work. This is supposed to be a community. This is supposed to be a commons that we all feed into and feed from. And it should go both ways. And if we can't control our algorithms, then what the hell are they good for? I want to tell that algorithm what I want it to do. I want it to be a tool that works for me, not works for somebody else in my name. I don't need more delegation. I need less delegation and a little more hands-on when it comes to things like that. I need to be responsible for putting in the input, because as I sit here today, I will tell you, the next goddamn algorithm that recommends Pink Floyd to me is going to get torn out of my computer, right? Oh, yeah, well, you like cottage cheese, you'll love Spam, right? Yeah, sure. I listened to a King Crimson album, so you think I'm going to listen to Dark Side of the Moon because what? They're temporally related. But again, that's how algorithms work. It's temporally related. Sure, looks close. A bunch of other people did this,
Yeah, yeah.
right? But I
I
don't want to be
listened
that focus group.
the one time when I don't listen to Creative Commons music, mostly just because I don't I don't have enough of it. I should rephrase that. When I don't listen to exclusively Creative Commons music, because
Gotcha.
today on my workout, Altars of Grief, their album Iris, one track from that came on. But this is the one time when I just sort of like YouTube do their thing, and like YouTube has there's enough like old like punk videos and metal stuff that like it can hit the right, more or less the right vibe when I'm working out.
Right.
But I decided I wanted to kind of, I have a playlist that I can go to on like, like race day. But I don't want to listen to that all the time, because then, like it doesn't have the same effect, like the dopamine levels, like you get used to it. So I was like, I'm going to listen to some Megadeth.
Sure.
So I was listening to Peace Sales, and now so this happened yesterday, and that workout and today both I had to suffer through like 27,000 fucking Metallica songs. And it's
Yep.
like some of those are okay, and like one is like okay, like fuck Metallica first off, like
Yep.
Lars specifically. But okay, their stuff in the 80s was good. Okay, like I'm fine, but like I don't need to listen to one when I'm working out. Like stop it. Stop. I don't need that. Like so
The thing that should not be is not your workout
I'm
music.
just like it's just like I don't need the like 4-minute intro. I'm just like cut that part out, and just like when they start when they start shredding, just give me that. Just
Yeah.
like, but the first 4 minutes of one, I don't need it.
No.
Stop it. But like I sweat so much, I can't like it's on its own. Like it is, I can't control it. Like you're talking about like I need to be able to, like I can't touch my screen. Like it doesn't work. My phone does not work when I'm working out. So it's like I press play, and whatever it fucking plays for me is what it plays for me. So except like I said on race day, I removed this problem by having a playlist, and one does not.
Mm.
I don't think any Metallica exists on that playlist. I'd be surprised if I would have put it on there, but yeah, like I said, yeah, fuck Metallica. I kind of wish it just would not play any Metallica, but it's like okay, Master of Puppets, whatever. That's a pretty good workout song, to be honest. So I don't mind it too much. But like both days, it gave me one, and two is
Oh,
enough. Like I'm done. I have forgotten until now that I need to like go block that. I don't know what I need to tell YouTube. Just please do not give this to me. It's not the right vibe at
right.
all.
Well,
So
that's exactly it, right?
yeah,
You don't know how to put that into YouTube's algorithm and say,
yeah,
dude, stop, please.
yeah. I probably just need to like block Metallica, which would not be the end of the world actually. So
No,
just
but that's a pretty non-fine tooth comb.
that is true. That is
That's a
true.
shillelagh when you want a scalpel.
Yeah, yeah.
We don't always want to be doing that. Sometimes, well, I will never ever listen to another damn Pink Floyd song. But if there were 2 or 3 songs in their entire discography that I could tolerate, there aren't. But if there were, and I didn't mind them coming up, I would go, okay, well, can you limit this? Right? Can you limit this to the choices that I give you? And then still continue to experiment with other things. And so maybe, because I'm listening to King Crimson, you might throw something really odd at me, like, oh, eschaton or magma or some French Zale music, right? Okay. But that never, ever will come up on a YouTube algorithm. It simply won't.
Yeah.
And
What
that's because they don't understand how my patterned brain works. And
I
if they could, if they let me.
I don't know if Pandora still does this. I haven't logged into Pandora in a long time, but
Yeah.
they used to have a deep cuts
Hmm.
option, which which I appreciate. I don't remembering it being super great, but at least I appreciated the effort at the very least.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like it's a recognition that not everybody wants like the popular songs. And it's like even if I do like the popular songs, I don't want them all of the
All the
time.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the deal. And I mean, that used to be the deep cuts thing used to be a meme back when Pandora was, sort of the proto Spotify, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's one thing to be in a mood to listen to the Dead Kennedys, which I every so often do. But I'm probably good not hearing California Uberalis for a while. You know, you could pick a couple dozen other songs that I'd rather hear than that. And it's not me against DK. It's not that I don't like them. It's that I'm good, right? There's and it was the same when I was running. I was running a record store with my friend back in the days. There were albums that we simply would not put on, even if we liked them, because you hear that crap all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm a pretty big fan of Rush's Moving Pictures, but I will never ever play it. Right? Like, when I was in high school, I heard it so much, even within the first couple of months, I didn't want to ever hear it again. It's like, okay, that's cool, but I'm not going to play that for somebody else. Or you have the other sort of alternate thing, which is I only want to hear that when I put it on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
only want to hear that album when I choose it. I'm not going to listen to that in a cafe because I'll just get angry
Yeah.
or something like that. And those are options that should be there, and they're not. And the thing is, even if I were just thinking about it from the point of view of being a typical capitalist corporate suck up, right? There's plenty of money to be had in using people's will. There's so many businesses that have that as their model, in fact. Like, if you allow me just a little bit of input and make me
Yeah.
feel like I'm part of this,
Right.
you would make twice as much money from me, three times as much money from me as you do right now. Indeed, you would make some money from me instead of the zero money that you make from me right now.
Yeah. Yeah. w- I I I don't know if you saw I was like, I bet Omar and I could talk for like 4 hours, and
Oh,
I
sure.
feel like that prediction is coming true. But I'm not going to let it. Well, I have to go to Lunar New Year celebrations at some point. So
Yeah, I made my food already, so that's all set.
but but I think it's interesting because talking about like the making the money and stuff like and having the record store and like I feel like there is money to be made into like the niche market, but you have to present it right. Like
Yeah.
I think that like maybe that's what Title wanted to do, but like the people that ran Title were like so famous that they didn't like they knew what they wanted to do, but they had like no idea how to do it.
Hmm.
Or maybe they didn't even know what they really wanted, but they thought they knew. I'm not sure, but I feel like their fame probably got in the way of that being a successful venture.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is not always how fame goes, but I think maybe it wasn't the right people for that. The money was probably what it needed, but maybe just not their vision.
Yeah, I mean,
Like
for
pair
poor folks, money is always the good
so
thing,
what
right?
what Title needed to be is it needed to be those folks money, but like get like Kim Gordon, and maybe even she's too big, I don't know, but like Kim Gordon and like Ian MacKaye, like that's who I'm thinking. Like maybe just give them the money and let them come up with it.
Oh yeah,
And maybe it would be pretty good.
yeah, and I think the spirit of an adventure is right. I think you need something like Tidal. I think everybody knows there has to be something that isn't Spotify,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Everybody knows there has to be something that isn't the bad version of Pandora that we kind of got saddled with. I would even go so far as to say everybody has a pretty sizable agreement on what elements that thing would include. Because as it turns out, regardless of people's taste, they tend to want their access to be similar. They
Yeah.
want to access different things, but they want the same kind of access to the things that they want, which is perfectly logical. And providing that access is the way that you can easily make money off of that venture, but you have to understand what the stakes are. The
Yeah.
stakes are not just hearing different things. If the stakes were just hearing different things, I could get lost on the Internet Archive just on random searches, right? So it's not that. It's focus search. It's what you really want is, how do I put this? What you really want is an algorithm that is like the record store clerk at,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. That is what you
right?
want.
That's what you
Yeah.
want. The person who will say, "Hey, I haven't seen you in a while. What are you listening to now?" And then will immediately go, "Hey, I know you kind of like this style sometimes. Check this out." And you listen to him and you go, "Oh, okay, yeah, that's not too bad." Or you go, "Yeah, maybe not this time. I'm kind of into, singer-songwriter with distortion and jangly, right now," or something, right? But there's a kind of feedback between you and the record store clerk where he could or she could correct you on certain things and send you down a path that you didn't even know you wanted to go down.
Right.
Or they could clarify the path that you were already on and go, "Oh, yeah, that's over here. Why is Andy Summers in the New Age section? God, if I know, but for some reason we put it here. But I'm the person who knows that, and you're not, right?"
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what the algorithm should be good for.
Yeah.
As it stands, it's not.
Yeah. Uh,
Oh,
all
yeah.
right.
Oh,
I'm gonna ask the end question.
sure.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about? Say to the
Mm.
people before we leave.
Let's see. Oh, let's see. Um, I think I want people to support each other a little bit more than they do. I think I want to, in spite of being in charge of Netlabel Day, I've found that a lot of people who are the audience are still kind of clueless about it, and the cluelessness starts from the artists. And so there's a
Yeah.
kind of a broken relationship between them, and I think part of it is that I find myself having to answer questions like my poor teenage student who said, "Well, if you can produce every sound on a computer, why would anybody ever play an instrument?" Like, well, while that is a very good question, the best answer to that is for you to tell me, right? You tell me. Pick up an instrument and tell me what the difference is. And what you'll immediately find is that even if you're just kind of screwing around on a Roland 909, right? I'm going old school here. I'm feeling Curtis Mantronic in my bones right now. Yeah. But if you're just screwing around with a phase quantizer and a 909 or an 808, well, that doesn't make you Grandmaster Flash. That doesn't make you Curtis Mantronic. There's still a person behind that makes that happen. And I think we've gotten away from understanding that a little bit. I think we've started to believe that, well, it just kind of comes out of a computer, so it all gets made and it just exists.
Yeah.
And that really isn't the deal. And I think we need to appreciate people's effort a little bit more on that. So, support your local artist in that sense, but not just with money, because money, for us poor people, money solves certain problems. But really, if we don't have a concept of the problems that we want to solve, money just goes into a hole.
Yeah.
And that's the title problem, right? I think what we want is money to go to very specific things. But before we do that, we need to really have a plan. And I think nobody's really asked audiences what the hell they want. What do you guys want out of free music? oh, well, if it's all free, then la di da di da, right? We just assume that there's a whole program that comes with that, but nobody's ever said what it is. And I think musicians haven't listened to that nearly as much as they should. I think musicians are kind of wishing they had, more resources naturally because we're artists and that's what we do, right? But I think at the same time we have to appreciate the things that we make specifically for other people. Those are rarer for people like me because honestly I couldn't care less what people think most of the time about things that I do. I'm in that position, but I've always been that person, and I know a
Yeah,
lot of people are not like that. But if you do care, then ask them and set up a mechanism by which we can ask each other questions. Have more discussions between musicians and audiences, not like it's some kind of Taylor Swift cult, but like it's an actual meeting of people who are interested in the same thing. Yeah. I could sit down with Donnie or TSP and talk for a long time about interests that we share, even though I have no desire ever to make another hip hop beat, right? It doesn't mean that I'm not a fan, and it doesn't mean that I don't have questions for them.
right.
But artists have to make themselves accessible. And I think in a strange way, we need to make fans accessible. And I don't think we've really made much progress in making that happen. That's kind of one of the things that I'm working on a little bit with Netlabel Day is, hey, how all five of you people who listened to that hour of music, right, or something like that. Why are you here? What can I do to help you? What can I make better for you? What are the other interests that tie you to this? Are you listening just because this is Creative Commons music? Or do you know somebody personally? Or if you don't know somebody personally and you just stumbled on us, okay, then what holds you? Why do you last more than 5 songs? Why are you on my station all day long? Oh, I fell asleep. Okay, good answer. But at least I have the input, right? And I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
I think that's kind of our deal right now with all of our stuff in the digital world is we need a little more input from places where we're not getting input. And we need a little more interaction between things that are not currently interacting. And I think there was a time we thought that this was a territory battle, and I would like to say, for all you listening out there right now, the territorial battle over the internet is done. It's over. It never was, honestly, but it's surely over now. And so, if there's going to be any territorial battle, what it's going to be about right now is what's common, what's not. What do we share, and what do we not? Those are kind of more subtle discussions, but worth having also. And I think when we have a bunch of musicians who are worried that they're going to lose money, which is always one of my funniest things, like, well, considering 80% of us make less than $6,000 a year from our art, what are you going to lose exactly? I mean, but I don't want to be a jerk off when I say that, right? I
yeah,
know that's the numbers because I do people's taxes, and we read. We know that there's no money on that level of things, but we have to address what the real fear is. What are we really missing when we say that we're going to lose money? Do I lose money when I go out to a concert and people buy my merchandise? Maybe. Do I lose money by completely writing off all record sales and saying, well, if I put a free license on my stuff and somebody shares this with somebody else, um, I'm willing to speculate that they will then show up for me in some other way. And the ways that we show up for each other, I think, have been limited, and I think they need to be a lot broader than they are. Not just as artists showing up for fans, but also artists showing up for other artists and fans showing up for other fans, even if we're not particularly fans of the same thing. Because I think the struggle is the same. Otherwise we're all just part of the great computer in the sky, and why would you want that? Crying
yeah.
out loud. I'd like to think we've evolved beyond that. So, yeah, those are the things that are constantly on my mind. If you really want something to talk about, is I would like you all to talk a lot more amongst yourselves about things like this. And I'd like us to talk about these things like they matter and like they're not battles that are decided but ideas that are advanced. And sometimes time is off. Sometimes timing is not right, but
Yeah.
we'll never know if we don't try. So I think there's, despite my cranky sound, I'm actually pretty hopeful, in Václav Havel's sense of the word. I wouldn't say I'm an optimist because I'm not a moron, but I'm very hopeful, and I recognize the way that things are. But because I recognize the way things are, I recognize they could just as easily be any other way. And so you might as well make them the way that they should be in your mind,
Yeah.
and take some input from what other people think should be. I don't want to get all trite and quote, quote some famous anthropologist, but yeah, the only thing that ever changes people is other people. So if things aren't working out for us, then we need to start making them work out for us, at least on the small level first, and then we'll get to the big level later. And I did find my video just for you.
Very nice. Very nice. I was you were talking about quoting anthropologists. I was thinking about quoting Minor Threat.
Yes.
So but where is this in my, I wanted to get it right, but there we go. It says, you tell me that I make no difference. At least I'm fucking trying.
Yep.
What the fuck have you done? That's what I thought of when you said that we have to be the ones that make a difference. So,
yeah. It all starts small, right?
Yeah.
It all starts small because that's the human level, and we need to do things on the human level. Let other people worry about the big stuff. They get paid for it and we don't.
Yeah. All right, Omar. Well, we are going to enter crime time here.
Yes, crimes. Yes. Let's get sushi and not pay.
All right. All right. Thanks everybody for watching. And I'll say it again actually before we go. Next week, February 18th, Sunday, 2 p.m. Central. That's 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. And if you're in Europe, then use a calculator and find when that is. And if you're not in Europe, then it's probably just like, if you're in Asia, it's going to be the middle of the night. And I'm sorry, but you can come if you like. But